Hi folks, welcome to Thursday's edition of the I Write Radio podcast stroke videocast. Thursday, of course, means First Minister's questions. We'll cover that. We'll have a chat about the AUOB all under one banner virtual meeting, virtual conference at the weekend. There is going to be another one this coming weekend, I think only for invited participants this time. To try and put some structure into what was discussed. So there's been a few of the Yes bloggers have had comments to make on this. We're going to have a chat about that. And then I think Stuart wants to give Mr. Murphy, the economist, a wee plug. I think
yes,
that would
I think he wants to roast Kevin the Graph. Not Graft.
Vague Hague.
Kevin the Graft, pet food salesman Hague. Yes, give him a roasting.
Well, let's kick off with FMQs. You felt it was quite instructive this week, Stuart.
I learned quite a bit, which is, and also it occurred to me halfway through, and it more or less stayed the same, that there were very few speeches. We think back years to some of the awful FMQs that we sat through, where all the opposition people would just stand up and speech and speech and speech.
But I felt the thrust of it was, well, it was like the hyena pack. It was, please give us all the information that we want, so that when that information changes, we can criticize you for not using your crystal ball correctly.
I think that's fair. Did you notice it was noisy as well?
Yes.
I mean, not constantly, and nothing like we've had in the distant past, but it was really quite noisy. There was a lot of grumbling and moaning, and the presiding officer, I thought that he should have told them to, button up.
Shut up.
Yeah, shut up. And I was a little curious why Kenny Gibson, I've noticed, seems to have taken up the seat so that he's always within the First Minister's camera. Whenever the camera's on him.
I get the impression Mr. Gibson's quite ambitious.
He is having trouble, I've gathered. He's being picked as the candidate.
He's under a bit of pressure, I think.
Under a bit of pressure.
So, right, what did Baroness Ruth Davidson of the Baronessy of Baronet?
Well, she didn't score any hits, that's for sure.
I didn't feel she was looking to score hits, I have to say. I think she was simply asking for the impossible.
I think that the interesting question was, what did she'd heard the rumor about, for 1 day easing of restrictions at Christmas, we'll have 5 days of lockdown in January, which is a story that's come up from London. I don't think it's a Scottish story. And she was trying to say, oh, well, we're already having our lockdown in the central belt of Scotland, level 4. So how does that work out?
Well, I suppose that the kind of contentious thing she said was, you're promising everybody a Christmas if they lock down now. So why are they going to have to lock down again after Christmas?
Exactly. She used the term,
it's really,
we're going to get a bill later as well, she said. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the other thing was, it was all about, this is your lockdown. This is the government, the Scottish government are imposing this lockdown on people. Not quite as blunt as that, but everybody, all the opposition parties were leading with this is somehow the Scottish government's fault, not the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic.
And she kept, for her last question, she said she thought she'd scored a home run with talking about the military, because apparently we know that the students are going to get mass tested so they can go home for Christmas. The military, 10,000 military in Scotland, will they get the same mass testing and be able to go home at Christmas? And apparently there was some story in some remote newspaper that suggesting that it wasn't going to happen in Scotland, but it was going to happen in England. The military will go home in England, but not in Scotland.
Does Baroness Davidson seriously think that Nicola Sturgeon can order the army in Scotland to do something different to the MOD.
Excuse me. In this instance, she should be referred to as Lieutenant Colonel.
Sorry.
You're forgetting that she's the Lieutenant Colonel in the Army.
Baroness Lieutenant Colonel Davidson.
Yes.
So I would have thought as a disciplined service that a soldier does what the MOD tells him to do, what his commanding officer tells him to do, not what Nicola Sturgeon. I don't think Nicola Sturgeon has any remit over the army at all. What part of that was dissolved to Holyrood?
We can't even fly a Scottish flag on Edinburgh Castle, for crying out loud.
Well, you know, so that was a way. I was sitting thinking disciplined service. Not quite sure she knows how this works, and she should. As you say, she's a kiddie on colonel, isn't she?
So what did you think about Richard Leonard? I thought he was a sneaky little...
I actually thought it was hilarious. Mrs. Well, I mean, a shame. Mrs. Smith, who's got stage 4 cancer, wants to go on holiday with her kids. What are you going to do about it? Well, actually, I wrote a letter to Mrs. Smith telling her that her situation falls under compassionate reasons to travel. So stick that in your pipe and choke on it, Mr. Leonard.
He then, of course, came back with a completely pointless list of all the things he's complained about for the last year.
And he won't have mentioned the fact that he agreed with unblocking beds in the NHS, and that he agreed with the British government, or sorry, his party agreed with the British government cutting down on testing in March, etc., etc. I mean, all these guys have been doing for the last 8 months is storing up I told you so's.
So he actually asked the question, would the First Minister rethink the travel ban? No. So he expects us all to risk more deaths.
Well, the travel ban was, I don't think, ever intended to be implemented. People aren't going to get arrested unless they're really stupid.
Right? It could be a traffic jam. There'll be a traffic jam all the way from Livingston to IKEA in Midlothian.
Well, no, I mean, this is important because it's the psychology of it. As soon as you made masks, wearing face masks mandatory, the usage of face masks went up. Mm-hmm. And this, I would presume, this is exactly what the mandatory travel ban is trying to do, is trying to get more people to obey it rather than throw people in jail or fine them.
And the point of the travel ban is Scotland is not in a total lockdown. There's a half of Scotland not in anything like a lockdown, and therefore for that to work, you have to have a travel ban between the two
to protect
different areas. Yes, protect them.
Yeah. So basically, I mean, I really do. Sometimes I wish you would just get up and say, okay, how many people is it acceptable to die? Could you give me your figure for that?
Well, she finished off even better than that. She gave this quite long quote. Don't ask me to give you the whole quote. Wonderful quote. Da 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 da. And you know who was it? That it wasn't her quote. It was the Labour First Minister of Wales,
Mark Drayford. Yeah.
So there's poor Richard Leonard lying there on the floor, battered and bruised.
But I mean, it's. I should have, and I think I might well start archiving what they said in March and April and start comparing it to what they're saying now. Because the Tories especially were all for everything that's gone wrong. They were screaming for it. They wanted out of lockdown of any sort as soon as possible, wanted people back to work, etc., etc., etc. Now they've learned to wind their necks in a bit because they've been hit with so many mistakes. But it's hindsight Harry's. Great.
I thought Alison Johnson for the Greens had a better session than she normally does, because normally I much prefer Patrick Harvey to be asking the questions.
Oh, we passed We passed a bill yesterday for 2,000 teachers. Why aren't they at work today? Question.
Well, that wasn't what bothered me. It was she did actually score a small hit with a pellet gun over the hotels, because it is a question that I've asked myself, because I know that in other parts of the world, for example, in New Zealand and in Australia, when people are forced into quarantine, the government can put them in hotels and pay for it. But apparently the First Minister herself had said yes back in May that they would do it, and she wasn't able to answer that. So it was a small pop gun hit.
I think what you might find is she didn't say yes, they would do it. I think she said yes, she thought it was a good idea. Because if you imagine the Scottish Government budget is going to stretch to that.
Well, I don't know. I was to say, I think it's a good idea myself, to be honest.
And who's going to pay for it?
I have no idea, but it happens elsewhere. That's my excuse for bringing it up.
Well, the only place it's happening in the UK is with asylum seekers being moved out of hostels and into hotels. And the British government's paying for that, and they're not paying very much for it.
Yeah, there's another issue, of course.
So,
what about you? You must be excited that Willie Rennie was up there, and I guess he was one of his favourite topics again, wasn't it? We used to be school kids. Nowadays, he managed to combine two of his favourite topics: mental health and the police.
I'd kind of like to know. We had a well-being nurse introduced to Lothian Borders Fire Brigade when I was a firefighter. One for the whole of Lothian and Borders. And she was unfortunate because she was there when Lockerbie happened. And she ended up, I think she left the job because of the effect Lockerbie had on her personally.
I bet. Oh God, that must have been horrible.
But so we had this, and she was a mental health nurse. I mean, she did a survey of all the firefighters. Now, Lothian Borders was the second biggest brigade in Scotland, only to Glasgow, obviously. So if they've got 12 mental health practitioners for Police Scotland, I would imagine that that's quite a lot.
Well, if you think about it, Scotland's got 8 regions when it comes to the European Parliament, and that would mean you have 1 each for the smaller regions and 2 each for the big ones.
Well, that seems like quite a lot to me. Unless, every policeman in the land needs psychiatric nursing.
I have some news for Willie Rennie, which he won't know anything about. It's what you might call an exclusive. It's on an interview I did with Mike Stevenson, which we haven't used. And he tells me he spoke at a conference in Burton-on-Trent in England, where it was every police force in England apart from the Met were attended. And they were dead keen and very pleased at what had happened with police in Scotland, and they were all wanting to emulate what had happened with police reconstruction in Scotland. So Willie Rennie will be very pleased to hear that, won't he?
Well, I mean, everybody except the Liberal Democrats supported it at one time, didn't they? It's a weird one. I'm actually just rethinking what I said a minute ago, because this idea, and I know it's been trialed in England, where a mental health professional goes out with the police to incidents. So helps the police deal with members of the public as a mental health professional.
I wasn't 100% sure what Willie Rennie meant by 7 hours and 20 minutes was a typical length of time for someone to handle a case. Now, presumably that was, let's say, 2 police in Scotland went to somebody's house and they discovered it's a mental health issue. And apparently half the time they go out to crime, that's what it is, a mental health issue.
Well, that's why I brought up what I've just said, because it wasn't clear to me whether this was 12 people dealing with police problems or 12 people dealing with members of the public alongside the police.
I doubt if they'd be going alongside the police. They'd probably be.
Well, in
after.
England, apparently it's been really quite successful.
All right. Well, I wouldn't know. I just imagined in my mind that it would be in the case of, well, you know, having been involved in a traumatic case, perhaps they might need referred.
Well, there are certainly people doing it. In fact, has Jimmy not got a pal that does it out of St. Leonard's?
No, I don't know.
But I mean, that to me sounds like a great solution if, you know, if that's the case.
Look, there's one thing I do know, having been through the system myself, and with family professionals in the system. If the medical system, if the NHS can get you onto pills, they will, because as soon as you have to get a consultation with a human being, that costs a fortune.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, and you know, and the police are not mental health consultants, so
well,
I presume the 7 hours is the police hunting for a suitable health professional to help them deal.
I'm not sure. I got the impression it was that's how long an officer could be involved in a case. You know, you get called out to a house because somebody's lost the plot and is smashing things up or something, and then by the time they go off duty, it'd be 7 hours and 20 minutes later. But that's my own imagination at work.
Well, I'm afraid I don't believe very much that Willie Rennie says. I'd need to see the stats. I'd need to see that backed up. I can't think of an incident that involved the fire brigade, which most, for instance, suicide attempts do. You know, people jumping off the South Bridge, etc.
Don't tell me. Oh, horrible thought, I know.
It's certainly, I can't remember ever taking anything like 7 hours to be dealt with. Mind you, I didn't have to book them at either end.
So you'll be sending the wife out to IKEA on Sunday to get some wine glasses for Christmas and
no, I won't, because
napkins.
It's an illegal, unnecessary journey from a level 3 area to a level 2 area. So she's not getting to go to IKEA. Besides which, she was there on Monday with Becky.
Okay. Okay, I'll leave it at that. But let's not get too personal. What about free ports in Scotland? And what's your opinion about them?
Well, I tried to, when this was first muted, ages ago, the two things I suppose I should say here. One is you can have free ports when we were in the EU. There was no reason you couldn't have free ports if you wanted them when we were in the EU. It turns out that it was equally possible. And free ports are basically somewhere you can put goods and not have to pay any tax on them.
That's right. So
I suppose the easiest way to explain it would be to say, if you import wine from France into the UK, you've got to pay VAT on it. All right. You can cellar it in such a way under bond where you don't pay VAT until you sell it out of the bond. So the bond is a VAT-free space, specifically for drink, for wine, etc. Free ports are that on a bigger scale.
Yeah, duty-free. That's what duty-free bonds. So yes, it's been around for hundreds of years.
You can move American stuff in there and then sell onto the continent or whatever.
Well, apparently,
what advantage has got to goods manufactured in the UK? I don't know.
Well, the idea is the First Minister, when she was asked about it by a troublesome Tory called Graham Simpson, and he sat down and smirked. He thought he'd scored one. I could see the camera on him. And he sat back like this, with a stupid smirk on his face, but he got scalped. I'm not sure. She got backed up. Not only did she answer the issue with free ports, John Mason, SNP backbencher, backed her up as well. And he said the point is that back in the 80s, they had free ports in this country. But more importantly, the experience in America apparently is all you get in free ports is you get jobs moved from jobs get moved into the free port.
Yeah, but moved behind the wire because
Lower taxes.
It's also possible that the taxation and the rights of people working within the wire of the free port can
health
be
and
different.
Safety. Yep, health and safety
different to the rest of the country.
Human rights.
Yeah. So the First Minister was very leery. We will look at the advantages and disadvantages before we decide.
And she did say, having our Parliament will decide on that. And then she threw in, and by the way, it's not a disaster having a Parliament decide, a devolved Parliament decide on whether we'll have free ports or not.
That was the only mention I spotted of the Boris Johnson quote.
I thought she might come back again. I think you're right. I thought she might come back again with another opportunity to do it, but she threw it in there just a little bit.
Anything else strike you today?
Pauline McNeill. As I say, every time Pauline McNeill asks a question, I always get the feeling that Pauline and Nicola go way back, shall we say? Do you know what I mean? Way, way back.
I think you just feel that because she asks sensible questions.
Possibly. What is it? Caught in a COVID trap. It's this is a report by the Resolution Foundation, which immediately got me. Ooh, wait a minute. Is that another one of these far-right think tanks?
Resolution, is it not a lefty think tank?
Oh, I don't know. Apparently, there was one reasonable question she asked about with reference to that. People who didn't get any furlough. We have a friend who could file through the furlough scheme and didn't get anything. Apparently that part of the report, there is an analysis of who missed out on furlough. She did ask about backdating this new Scottish child payment. It starts somewhere in the spring.
Stuart,
backdating it.
I'm looking forward to seeing the books for this year, because the extra help that the Scottish Government's given to small businesses and the wee dribs and drabs, the wee extras, are going to have mounted up by now, and I wonder how much is left of the contingency that everybody always complains about them having.
Yeah, she was asked also about some scheme in Wales that the Welsh Government had limited it going to companies that were paying themselves bonuses because of, I forget who they were.
No, this was the Tesco thing. Some of the big supermarkets have made bigger profits.
They've done quite well out of this.
But they would still be allowed the rate relief that all businesses were given. And the Welsh Government seemed to have found a way to pull back on their rate relief and pass it on to small businesses.
Right. But the First Minister explained that here in Scotland, it was passed, it was legislation for a whole year, the rates relief, rather than just a temporary one. And it's really not simple to claw that back at the moment. Yeah,
maybe missed a wee chance there, but we'll know next time.
So sorry?
No, on you go.
So the presiding officer, we got Angela Constance. She asked 3 questions, and they were just constituency ones. I'll not tell you what they were because they're irrelevant. But the presiding officer chided her. No more part 3 questions, he says. We should have told them to shut up at the back, like they would. Any teacher would have told them to shut up at the back. Honestly, I don't know what else I've got. Oh, Freeports, and that was it.
Yeah, I think that was about it. I can't say as I think I learned too much today.
Well, I enjoyed it for a change. Quite often, I just feel like,
my highlight was definitely Richard Leonard getting his knuckles wrapped about the poor woman who's got stage 4 cancer.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's a serious issue, but yeah, I sometimes miss, and for years we used to score all the main participants at First Minister's questions out of 10 for performance, and I quite miss that sometimes, because sometimes that's all that the only interesting thing that we learn watching it. But today was a bit different.
Everybody on 2 except Nicola and Ruth Historically, that was basically how it was scored every week. Ruth occasionally did a bit better than Nicola, but very occasionally, and nobody else had a look in. I mean,
we didn't always agree, though, did we? Sometimes,
no,
especially with the four of us round the table, the banter could be good banter, you know. Right.
Well, let's move on to the latest. Well, I don't suppose it is an iteration yet, but the latest attempt to corral the roots,
like that.
the roots of the Yes movement, which is the AUOB, all under one banner, have moved into conference politics from marching. So there's been a couple of people writing about it today. George Caravan, I don't think you caught George's piece, did you?
No, but I did catch Mike Small's reaction and Peter Bell's as well.
Well, I would sum George Caravan's piece up as confused. I find myself, and this is not normal for me, to be almost 100% in agreement with Mike Small. But George started by saying that this new movement to be called Yes Alba,
yes,
possibly.
I didn't know that until I read that.
He started by saying it can be owned by no political party, no one particular political bent, and then proceeded to explain why it should be owned by the left. And his article read like something from the 70s to me. An awful lot of words that I haven't heard. He's definitely a class warrior, is our George, and that's the way he writes. But to me, it just looks like the usual mistakes are going to be made. Different people on the left will argue with people in the center, who will argue with people on the right, who will all claim that their form of independence is the best one, and it will come to nothing because of that. Mike Small, I thought, was doing really well until just about the last paragraph, when Mike, writing on his own blog, Bella, when he listed all the people that would have to be brought in and listened to, which was RIC, the
I've got them here if you need them.
The convention. Well, read them out. There's about 5 of them.
Voices for Scotland, Scottish Greens, Women for Indy, RIC, Business for Scotland, and the Scottish Independence Convention.
Right, all the usual suspects, who all have different political shades, and who, as I said, I mean, I really liked Peter's analogy of the danger of all the colours of the Yes movement becoming a grey sludge. Yeah. And I think if you think about the bars on a rainbow, the coloured bars on a rainbow, that do not overlap, that do not seep into each other, and they keep their colour from one end to the other. Let the different types of political stance speak to the people that agree with them about independence. Do not try to make independence about a particular political culture.
You can't.
It won't work.
He's quite. I mean, it is. It's a great analogy, you know, because the one thing is the SNP has not set out to be any particular, you know, to adopt any particular policies officially, but we know it has, and up to now they've declared themselves to be social democratic, slightly left of centre, have they not? It's been said many times, but we seem to be seeing a drift a bit more to the middle and perhaps a wee bit to the right of middle.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think they've run out of the easy social democratic options now. Free education, free school meals, free nursery care. That stuff's all been done, you know, and I think they've gone kind of too far on the woke side with the GRA bill, for instance. So they're now looking at grown-up politics, NATO, WMD, and that's difficult because they have to look grown up, and that's not going to, the anti-nuke crowd aren't going to like them looking grown up.
I'll be honest with you, though. I mean, yes, I can see it from both points of view, my personal politics and then also the desire for an independent Scotland. Now, I don't like what Stuart MacDonald gets up to, the SNP defence spokesperson. But apparently he and I'm not sure who else it was, have actually produced a report, which
Alan
is
Smythe.
Alan Smith, Smith with a Y, Smythe.
Smythe.
They jointly come up with a contribution to, it's a contribution to the Britain's defence posture.
It's an SNP paper.
It's an SNP paper as a contribution to what Britain's defence posture should be. Now, that's possibly just gone too far for me.
Well, I mean, it seems to be taking a multilateral stance instead of a unilateral stance.
Well, and there's another thing. I am a unilateralist, without a doubt.
And that's a big problem. And it'll be a big problem for a huge number of grassroots SNP.
Can I quote a wee bit this, because Mike Small here. The opposition to the SNP's approach combines people who are opposed to WMD, Bairns Not Bombs. I've worn one of those. People angered by the lack of progress towards the referendum. People furious about trans issues. People motivated by the hate bill. People who are passionate against the leadership. People obsessed with the woke. People who fantasize about Alex Salmond's resurrection. People who believe a plan B is the most important issue we face, and people who believe in the importance of a new Scottish currency, and on and on. It's not a bad list.
And that's kind of, as I say, I find myself in the unusual position of almost fully supporting him. But he then goes on to point out the rest of the divisions, which are RIC, who did a great job. Within their own bubble, they went out and they signed people up to vote. Fantastic.
Did they not get 1,000 people in a hotel in Glasgow, and they had to pay £10 each to turn up?
Well, you know, they did a good job.
And there was also the cultural people.
And let them do that job.
Who were the cultural people that had a day on Princess Street? They were all, you know, these.
Well, and we don't need a leadership dictating to everybody what steps to take.
I'm not sure, but what about all these yes groups? Shouldn't there be perhaps somebody come up with some funding? There's the Scottish Independence Foundation. Are they fundraisers and then passing money out to individual yes groups?
And that's fine with no strings attached. So if you happen to be in Govan and everybody in your yes group is a rabid socialist, great. Do what socialists do. If you happen to be at Murrayfield and your yes group's full of Tories, do what Tories do. You know, have tea mornings or whatever, cake sales, you know.
Baking cake.
Yeah, I mean, it allow people
bake off
within their own political bubble to converse with people in that bubble.
I'm trying to think what the quote was. Somebody was suggesting that the SNP government should do something now, and it was like clearly a case of that's something that the SNP government should have nothing to do with. The first government of an independent Scotland should be dealing with it, and I can't even remember what the issue was.
Well, I think the message that really needs to be got across, and you know, I've disagreed with Peter Bell about a few things, but certainly the only message is independence. Get independence done. Mm-hmm. Then we can argue about what sort of country we want to be. Because if we start discussing that now, it's all right to discuss it, but if it gets in the way of the fight for independence, if we waste energy and resources trying to decide whether we want to be the People's Republic of Judea or the Judean People's Republic, the Unionists will win.
Well, and we will be forever held responsible by our descendants for not doing the right thing at the right time.
Well, the hope that I see both in George's piece and Mike Small's piece is that Mike seems to be there. He seems to get we need an umbrella organization that isn't driven by left, right, or center. He hasn't come out and actually said that, but he seems to be hinting that.
Okay,
George isn't there yet, but is confused enough to say it and unsay it at the same time.
Look, we're not going to get over the line unless we have this everybody aboard, a broad coalition. And if it did get over the line, if I'm wrong, and it did get over the line with just a left-wing coalition, that would leave an awful lot of angry right-wing people. And then
your problem is the left wing that Mike's talking about aren't left of center; they're left wing.
Yeah. And then you've also got the question of democracy. You know, even most left-wing people I know will concede that we will need a Tory party in an independent Scotland. That's the way life is.
Well, what I find particularly galling about it, if you're of the left in Scotland, why are you worried about the Tories? Why do you give a flying that the Tories are going to be in an independent Scotland? Are they suddenly going to get 51% of the vote?
Well,
oh, no.
I believe the Tories did get over 50% of the vote in about 1954.
Well, it was before I was born, Stuart, and I'm no young.
I'm not that old. I may be a pensioner, but I'm not that old.
Well, I mean, the point I'm making here is the left don't have to fight with each other before independence. They'll have plenty of time to fight with each other after independence because there isn't going to be a right wing worth fighting. One of the advantages will be what form of left of centre politics will Scotland have, not if we have left of centre politics, unless something really dramatic happens.
Well, we're going to be
between now and a yes vote.
The future of economics for the next 10 years is going to be some sort of Green New Deal. Exactly what interpretation will be put on that phrase, but even the likes of Biden is talking about a Green New Deal. Even Johnson is talking about a Green New Deal.
Well, yeah, but I spent a couple of hours yesterday trying to have a look at this Johnson Green New Deal.
Oh.
This is a Green New Deal driven not by government, right? No. I can't remember how much they're putting into it. It's a pittance. It's a pittance, $4 billion.
And it's not just it's the amount of money. It's about a third of what Germany or France are putting into their Green
because they want.
And they're not exactly rabid left-wing governments, are they?
Well, they want it driven by the marketplace. They want it profit-driven. Which means it'll be a long time before you and I will be able to afford to buy anything.
Yeah, and they want to continue
wind-powered
with having nuclear power. They're only and look at the price, let alone the legacy. Look,
they're going to be so much fairer about nuclear power this time.
Oh, they're going to spread it around.
16 new nuclear power stations. So every conurbation, except obviously London and the southeast, will be getting one. You can all have your own pocket power station.
All right. I saw a bit of something on TV the other day, and they were container-size modules, and apparently you just bolt them all together to make your own nuclear power station. Bear in mind, the Russians produce nuclear power stations that you can float to a remote Inuit community in the Arctic Circle so that they've got power.
Can you float it up the Thames? Just a question.
I think you should ask the Russians.
I think they just dropped one out of a big plane. You wanted to talk about Richard de Murphy.
Yes, Richard Murphy, the tax research, the English tax research expert that it's very much in favour of modern monetary theory and very supportive of the Scottish independence movement. He's got one or two fine quotes here. He attended an online meeting of the Scottish Young Fabians, at which, who else was there? Bomber Ballie.
Jackie Bailey, yeah.
Jackie Baillie was there, and Kevin, the pet food salesman, Hague, was there with his graphs, not his grafts. And they're just some wonderful quotes. Apparently, Scotland runs the biggest deficit in the whole of Europe. I mean, he was shocked. He said he did not expect the scale of economic illiteracy that was on view from all those who were asked to speak, nor had I expected the sheer level of contempt for Scotland that was on display. I believe
Kevin has gone and got himself a degree, an economics degree.
Well, that's okay.
Or an ONC or an ANC or something. He's got some sort of qualification now.
Sorry, have I ever waved my economics degree in front of you? No.
You haven't. You
haven't.
No,
exactly. You know, I first started studying economics when I was 17. I studied it constantly one way or another. Not but constantly, but right up until I was 37 or 38. And yet I still never waved my degree in front of you because economics is a very weird science.
Well, I mean, I think Richard Murphy, strangely enough, is not a believer in modern monetarist theory. His position is that it's already applied by governments all over the world.
Exactly.
They just don't name it.
It's not a theory, it's a description of what's already going on. You know, here's a quote from him. There was Kevin Hague, who presented some charts. He's always got charts, all of which were designed to show Scotland has the worst economy in Europe. Kevin more than happily convinced himself and all else present, apart from, obviously, from Richard Murphy. So he was aware that Bake Off was on at 8 o'clock. And so that I told him that since the quality of political and economic debate on Bake Off was bound to be of a higher calibre than that in this meeting, and that's where I'm going, and left the meeting.
I think we've got that to look forward to. The minute the next independence referendum is called, the likes of Ballie and Kevin Hague are going to be crawling out the woodwork. And that's the other thing. That's the other reason we shouldn't argue with them about this. We should simply turn around and say, don't care, want to be independent. Don't care, want to be independent.
Yeah, the problem is that we have an SNP that last time round produced an enormous white paper, which actually became an albatross around the neck of the campaign.
I think they have to lay out a prospectus. I hope they lay out a different one to the present one. For instance, I do think that we simply have to go for our own currency.
Oh, absolutely, I think that's
even if it takes 5 years, 10 years, it doesn't matter. The argument has to be from day one. Oh, we're going to have our own currency.
There is a very strong case. There's a very strong case for it. Very strong case.
You can stick your currency up where the sun don't shine.
Mm-hmm. Well, the risk, I've seen it, a decent debate online about, well, what if the new Scots pound collapses against sterling? Oh, and what if sterling collapses against the new Scots pound? So both cases, and it was interesting to see the different solutions.
Why would the Scots pound collapse against the sterling?
I'm glad to you. It's more likely to be the other way. It would still affect your pension, though. What if your pension was paid in English pounds and you hadn't yet agreed to have your pension paid in Scottish pounds in an independent Scotland, and the English pound collapses because it's no longer backed by all the oil and gas under the North Sea?
My pension will be paid in the currency of the City of Edinburgh Council, mate.
I mean, the argument is that you don't actually have to extract the oil and gas out from the bottom of the sea. Just the fact that it's there will back your Scottish currency, because it's a backstop.
It's an asset.
Yes, it's an asset sitting there under the ground.
Yeah, black gold.
So you can,
and the great thing about it, nobody can nick it. And no chancellor could sell it off like Gordie Bryn did.
And even the Greens can support it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, on that cheery note, will we call it a day?
I think we need to let people know that we're expecting Jimmy back again.
Oh, aye, Jimmy's gone all techie on us, and
he's going to be our new
roving reporter,
the expert in the taxi.
Yeah, he'll be beaming from the back of his cab. We hope, anyway. Hopefully, we'll see him tomorrow. Hopefully. Unfortunately, today during the test, he got a fare.
Well, he was the front of the queue. He's not going to turn down a fare.
So that's why he wasn't with us today. But hopefully tomorrow, we look forward to some interesting times. Okay. We'll see if we can get some nutcase to jump in the taxi.
What we should do is arrange to have a fare ready to walk up, dressed in a clown suit or something, you know.
Okay, you mean we'll send Kevin Hague? Sorry, did I say that out loud?
Well, anyway, let's not go down that road. I have some naughty ideas here.
Okay. Thanks for listening, folks. Thanks for being with us, Stuart.
Yeah, no, it's a pleasure, Nori.
And we'll catch you tomorrow. Hat Friday. I will almost certainly forget to wear a hat, but it is Hat Friday. Hopefully you can be with us then, folks. Cheers for now.